Hi, I'm John Moulis, and welcome to the third video in my series where I talk about bullying and harassment in the public service relating specifically to the Department of Finance. Now, as I've told you in the previous two videos, I was in Department of Finance in the late 1970s and the early to mid 1980s. And the bullying I received there was quite intense and ongoing. Now, in the last video I got up to when the shit really hit the fan, when this notion of perceived homosexuality involving me was suddenly an issue in the office, that it was wormed out of me, the inference, the gay inference, by Gary Holmes, the alcoholic pedophile who spent all of his time fantasizing about having sex with little schoolgirls in uniform. And he used to come into work, and I'd come into work and he'd be there and he would have his head down on the desk with a hangover, you know, and then when he lifted his head up about 10 minutes after work hours began, he would then start reading the Canberra Times. He would read every word of the Canberra Times, and he'd be there laughing at Ian Warden, who was a satirist with the Canberra Times, a writer with the Canberra Times. He's still with the Canberra Times, but back then he wrote, I think he wrote 3 or 4 columns a week for the Canberra Times, or he may have even written for the Canberra Times every day of the week, because he was a quite prolific writer. But anyway, yeah, and this business about perceived homosexuality, it completely changed the dynamics of the office. It really began all of that crap that really took a toll on me when I was working in the public service. And the worst thing about it was that the bosses didn't care. I mean, you had a director, Mr. Fawner, Bin Fawner his name was, and a deputy director, Jerry Van Meegen, and they just remained aloof from it all. They didn't do anything to stop it. They didn't issue guidelines about proper behaviour in the workplace. In fact, that era, the late 1970s, it was very much the Wild West regarding work in this country and employment in this country. It was very much the law of the jungle. There were no unfair dismissal laws. There was no industrial democracy. There were no anti-discrimination laws back then. In fact, in nearly all of Australia, homosexuality was still illegal. I mean, it was legal in the ACT and South Australia, but illegal everywhere else. And despite all of the advances of the 1970s, you know, you had characters in soap operas, Number 96 and The Box, promoting homosexuality all the time, and a seeming breakdown of prejudice against homosexuality, which he thought had happened. It was very much still 1950s type attitudes, especially in Canberra and especially in the public service. I mean, the public service was like some massive dinosaur that you had these attitudes in the public service which just stayed around and couldn't be changed. But like I said, this and I just became a target. It was just intense and straight out bullying, and not just bullying and victimisation. In that place, in that job, there were threats of violence, of physical harm being done to me. I mean, Gary Holmes, the alcoholic pedophile, kept talking about someone called Roger the Lodger, who would come around and punch your lights out. That was the expression he used. He's going to come around one night and punch your lights out. You know, meaning, you know, I was going to be virtually killed by this person. You know, and no action was taken against him by the OIC or the director. In fact, his behaviour was actually encouraged by them. I mean, when Albert Stavarik, the OIC of Reconciliation, when he went on holidays, Gary Holmes was given his job acting OIC of Reconciliation. You know, and I was telling people, and other people in the office were noticing this victimisation, and Gary and Albert, the two of them, the OIC and the 2IC, they formed a tag team together, you know, bullying me. It was just relentless. And other people in the office were noticing it. I mean, there was this girl, I forget what her name was. You know, there was a few of us there in the cafeteria one day. She was there, and she was saying to me, look, this, you know, the treatment that they're giving you is terrible. You should do something about it. But of course, I didn't want to rock the boat. I mean, I was starting out in the workplace. I was unsure of myself, and I had never come across this situation before. So I didn't know what to do, and my response initially was to try and ignore it. And to do my job, to do the duties on the duty statement. But after a while, it just became impossible to ignore it. You know, just this constant negativity, this constant bullying and victimisation day after day. And so, I mean, I responded by trying to respond to it, you know, saying things to them. And of course, they were there trying to pull rank all the time. You know, I am a clerk class 5, you're only a CA2. You're only acting, trying to bring this rank business into it. And I kept hearing that all the time. I mean, even in jokes about it. You know, for example, I was eating a pie at my desk one lunchtime, and Albert came up. I was eating a meat pie with a hand like this, and Albert came up to me and squeezed my hand, and the meat from the pie went down the front of my shirt. And I said to him, "Oh, you bastard," I said to him. And he said, "Oh, Section 55. I mean, that was a threat at the time, Section 55, which was Section 55 of the Public Service Act, which related to disgraceful and improper conduct. And of course, that was an absolute rort in the public service. Anything that anybody senior to you thought didn't like was classified as disgraceful and improper conduct. So they could take charges against you under the Public Service Act for disgraceful and improper conduct. And you could even be dismissed under that section of the Public Service Act. I mean, it was open to abuse, and it was abused several times when I was in the public service. It was used against me quite unfairly for no reason, simply because I did things that these senior officers didn't like. But anyway, this was going on all the time, and even sort of little things that happened. For example, our office, Reconciliation, was relocated down the hall to another section of the Treasury building. And what had happened is that I had, you know, I was sick and tired of this. I got sick and tired of this fairly early in the piece, and I wanted to be promoted out of the department. I mean, I wanted to be promoted, I wanted to have a job in Woden, which was near my house where I lived, which would have made it a lot easier to get to and from work, because I didn't have a driver's license back then. I didn't have a car. I had to rely on public transport. So I sent out all these job applications, there would have been 7 or 8 of them, to departments in Woden. And the others in the office saw me with the typewriter. Of course, no word processing back then, no computers. You had an electric typewriter in the office, and you were allowed to use the electric typewriter if you were typing out job applications. And I was there, one-finger typist, you know, typing out the job applications. And I sent them all out to these departments. And then the very next morning, Albert said, right, we're moving. And I said to him, I said, what? He said, yeah, we're moving down the corridor. And I said, what, are we going to keep our old phone numbers? Because I'd put my phone number, my extension number, on all of these job applications. He said, no, we're getting all new phone numbers. And I said to him, and I was absolutely furious, because that wasn't a spur of the moment thing. He would have known that we were moving office for days before it happened, yet he didn't tell me. He allowed me to send out all those job applications with the old phone number on it, the old room number on it, and not tell me that we were moving to another section of the building. So we had to move down to the other office. And I thought, well, you know, I'll put a notice under my phone saying that if any phone calls come to this extension, to put them through to my new number. So I put this notice underneath the phone in the office. You know, no mobile phones back then, no email. It was before the internet, before mobile phones, everything. And they had PABX switchboard, which meant that people could phone in to the extension number from outside the department. And I put this notice under the phone and went to the new office, thinking that the new people who moved in there would take heed of it. But of course that office remained vacant for ages. I mean, 2 days after we moved to the new office, they went in there, they took all of the desks out, they took all of the phones out. There were no phones connected or anything, which meant that if they tried to phone up that number I gave them, it just rang out, you know. And what happened is that one of those departments managed to find me. You know, they asked personnel and everything. And when I went for the interview, that when I phoned up accepting the interview, they told me that they had gone through hell and high water to try and contact me. But anyway, you know, they just didn't care, you know, because I was only a little CA1, CA2, the lowest of the lows. I mean, they were Clark Class 4, Clark Class 5, all this sort of thing. Anyway, I was in the office, in that new office there, and the tension was just palpable, because of largely due to the seating arrangements. I mean, Albert Stavarik, the OIC, was there in line with the door, and then my desk was there next to the door facing him. So he was there looking at me all the time. Just when I was working there, he was there staring at me, you know, because he had stuff all to do. I mean, he had some work to do, but most of his time was just spent there staring at me. And of course, that's possibly the worst seating arrangement you could possibly have in an office, is to have two people facing each other. I mean, even if they get along, the constant facing each other all the time creates tension. And, you know, the amount of tension and the morale. The morale problem in the accounting office in Department of Finance was, the morale was absolutely rock bottom. It was when the Fraser government was in, there were cutbacks going on. It was just a very depressed time, and, you know, and there was personal politics going on all the time. I mean, somebody went for a promotion, they didn't get the job, so they appealed against it, and that created animosity, and all of these petty little things were going on all the time. And then, you know, and I can remember thinking, while all this was going on, I remember thinking, you know, this shouldn't be happening. I mean, this was 1978. I mean, this should have been the best year of the best decade of my life. I mean, I was, you know, in the workforce. I'd finished school. I was independent. I was earning money. Everything should have been going right, but it wasn't. And I was just wondering, you know, is this life? I mean, I can remember sitting down with my parents, you know, when this was at its worst, when, you know, the Canberra winter, freezing cold Canberra winter was at its worst. I remember, you know, sitting down with my mother discussing this because, you know, all my life there had always been a fail-safe way of dealing with any problems that arose concerning me. If anything happened at school, if a teacher said the wrong thing or I was being bullied, my parents would be able to come in, go into the school, talk to the principal, talk to the teachers, and they'd be able to fix it up. And, you know, and that had always been the fallback position. But in this situation, in the workforce, that wasn't possible anymore. I mean, my parents couldn't come in and fix things up. I mean, I was there by myself, and you had no idea how desperately alone and vulnerable I felt when that realisation sunk in. When all of this bullying started up, all of this harassment and victimisation, and it was really taking a toll on me, an emotional and mental toll on me, having to go in there day after day and have to put up with all of this shit, all this garbage, and there was no way of bringing it to an end. And everything I did, when I responded to it negatively, that only made it worse. It only intensified. So there was no way of dealing with it. And I remember sitting after, you know, about 10 months or so of this, I remember sitting down with my mother and saying, you know, I don't like this life I've got. Now, I said, is this life? You know, all I'm doing is just going to bed, waking up, going to work, acting like a little robot, you know, doing the same thing over and over, day in, day out, coming home, waking up, going to work day after day. I mean, and I thought, you know, am I going to have to do this for the next 50 years? I mean, every single day for the next 50 years just doing this over and over. I mean, I didn't want this. I wanted an alternative to that. I mean, I wanted a life where I could stay at home, do whatever I wanted, go wherever I wanted, and get paid the full salary I was getting at Department of Finance. I didn't want this business about being locked up in an office for 9 hours a day, having to put up with bastards, people I hated, and who hated me, and this bullying and harassment all the time. Why should anybody have to put up with that? And again, my mother didn't have any answers to that. She couldn't wave a magic wand and make it better. Like, you know, like what had happened all my life up until then. There was simply no answers to it. And she said to me, she said, look, you know, you'll be going on leave. Next year you'll have 4 weeks leave. You'll be able to go on leave. And I said to her, yeah, and when I come back it'll be exactly the same thing. Day in, day out, non-stop. Anyway, and, you know, and that really sunk in, and I thought, you know, I'm lost, I'm doomed, I'm stuffed. You know, this garbage, this is all life has to offer me, you know. But anyway, this is about to run out in about, what, 25 seconds. God, this 20-minute time limit on this camera, you know, and, you know, just when you start getting into it and start getting into your strides, it runs out. But anyway, come back for the next video and I'll talk about this further. Thank you for listening and goodbye from John. Bye.